I'm going to let everyone into the room, and then I will start with an intro. All right. Kyle, can you watch the lobby and let people in?
I sure can.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Beam office's BEAD office hours. I know I introduced myself last week, but I'm Angel Stenmark. I'm the grants manager for Beam. We are joined by several of our both Beam team members and our grant administration partners from Horn and Ready. So we just wanted to welcome you guys real quickly. We're giving everybody just another minute or two to get into the call. Unfortunately, I am not able to provide an NTIA update to the group this week. We are still awaiting that updated guidance. But as soon as we know something, we will definitely let you know. So for this week's office hours, I'm going to start off by handing everything over to Lindsay Howard from Horn. She's going to walk through a recap of last week and then a couple other pieces of information that we thought would be helpful for you guys as you go through the process. Just a housekeeping matter, we will probably go through and make sure that everyone stays muted unless you are the speaker at the moment, just so we're not picking up any background noise. We do have a couple of FAQs that Lindsay and her team are going to go through, and then we will have some time towards the end of this office hour meeting when Kyle and I can take some questions from you guys. So if you have anything that comes to mind as we're going through this, please feel free to go ahead and add those to the chat. But then you will have an opportunity once we get to the Q&A session. If you do have a question for us, we will ask that you just state your name and your organization that you're working with. And that's all I had. So Lindsay, I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, ma'am. Hey, everybody. Like Angel said, I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet. A recap from last week with some additional updates or guidance based on some questions that came in from last office hours. And we have updated our FAQ document as well. I believe every eligible applicant got an email last week, including that updated document. But if you haven't, it is on Beam's website. There's just a few, and I'll briefly kind of go over them real quick. The first one that we talked about last week was how to handle those indicated locations in your application. And I'll walk through that template here in just a second, but it is written in our FAQ document as well, just for some additional guidance after this office hours. The next one that we mentioned was which fabric version we're using. It is fabric version 4, and that is now reflected in the FAQ document as well. And then the last one that seemed to come up was the question of if you have to serve every eligible location in a project area. And so we have referred to our application guide in that FAQ document as well. But if you run into any specific scenarios outside of some of the examples we'll walk through in the location template, feel free to reach out and we can talk through those as well. So those three are reflected in the FAQ document. The one that is not reflected that I know everybody has is when the application window is going to close. At this time, as Angel said, we have not received any additional NTIA guidance. So as much as we hate to say playing it by ear, that is where Mississippi and several other states are at the moment. So we will keep everyone abreast of that as best as possible. Still under that 45-day window as originally anticipated, but pending the guidance and depending on the substance of those changes, the window can be changed accordingly. But again, just having to play it by ear at the moment, but we will keep everybody updated as we can. The one other one, Kalskeen, that I think was left off from last week was having to do with some engineering questions. So I'll turn that one over to you right quick.
Yes, I think last week we received a question about whether or not the professional engineer that certifies certain components of your application is required to be licensed in Mississippi. And as best we understand it, the state statute indicates that the firm has to be authorized to provide engineering services within the state of Mississippi. And we certainly encourage you to check that they have that authorization to practice engineering in Mississippi when selecting your firms to assist.
Thank you, sir. So that is just a brief update on some of the FAQs from last week. Again, as you have questions throughout this, please feel free to insert them into the chat. But next, what I thought would be beneficial for the group to go over is that pressing question of how to handle those indicated locations. So for anyone who might have not been on the office hours last week or has a similar question and just didn't get a chance to answer that, I'll share my screen and show you where this conversation is coming from. So the indicated locations in a BEAD application, this is a test one in our environment, is these little hazard signs, which are marked as indicated. So what that means is that there was an award made in CPF 2 that was after the challenge process. So it was not, those locations were not submitted to NTIA as part of the challenge process, so therefore not reflected in the challenge data as BEAD ineligible locations. So it was kind of merging the two. So these locations, if you have a project area that includes these, as you progress through the application, I'm going to skip over some of this initial application sections and go to infrastructure and technology. On this page, this is where you will download your location template that you will have to fill out with your application. So you'll click Export Location List. And when you open that up, you will get this file here, or something similar to this file here, with a series of columns to be filled out upon your application. And so we're going to talk through exactly how to handle those indicated ones. So the first thing you'll want to do is go to Beam's website or go to the broadbandms.com. You can go to it via this link, or if you go to Beam's website and click the click here button, it will take you there as well. You'll want to go to BEAD and then updates. And on the side here, you will have a series of data downloads, and there's this indicated CSV file that you can download, and that is a list of all of the indicated locations with that little hazard sign inside of the BEAD application portal. So you will use these alongside your application template if you do have indicated locations in a project area that you are applying for. And you will need to go to column E for indicated locations, which is the part of application column, and mark those as false. You do not want to include those in your application as they already have funding tied to them through CPF 2. And then in the exclusion justification category, you want to mark them as defined for S in this dropdown, which is defined for state. If you want a list of the defined exclusion justifications, it is in the portal itself under the question in infrastructure and technology, but it is also in the Beam BEAD application guide at the end under Appendix A. There's a listing here. So defined for has two selections. It either has a state enforceable commitment or a federal enforceable commitment. Although those indicated locations are from CPF 2, we are asking that they be marked as state enforceable commitments so that we can ensure that any that come in via that state category, we are going to assume and or note on the front end upon our review that those would be indicated, and then match all of those to our listing, the CSV file I originally pointed to you here. And then upon our review, we'll be able to reconcile those and make sure the ones that are marked indicated are truly indicated. So that's how we ask that you handle those. Please do not include those in your budgetary or engineering designs. And it should also be noted that upon substantiation on our review that these are in fact indicated in the CPF 2, they will not count against your score for not including them in your BEAD application. I want that to be very clear. It will not count against you if it is substantiated upon Beam's review. So that is how to handle indicated locations. This is also included in an FAQ here with a link to the file itself and just a run through of everything I just explained if you need a refresher. The next portion of the location template walkthrough that I wanted to briefly touch on is a scenario of what if you have a project area that you intend to apply for, but you have already begun building out parts of those unserved locations with private dollars, you will want to let the Beam office and our team know in your application template with your locations that those are not to be included in your application as you are already building those out. So you would want to mark them as false in part of application, and then in the exclusion justification category, you're going to want to mark them as defined 5, and I'll bring up that listing real quick. Defined 5 is location is already served by non-subsidized service or a private funded network. So if you were to mark any location IDs with that defined number 5, we will ask for some supporting documentation or evidence, whether that's customer billings, any type of export from your network that can show that you are in fact providing service to those locations. And that will be reviewed as part of your application. Of course, everything is subject to Beam team review, and make sure that everything is in fact substantiated with that evidence. So if you are already building something out with your private dollars, that is great. Feel free to not include it in your application, but we want the most accurate representation of what you are planning on serving with BEAD funds in this application process. I know that was a lot of information on the location template, so please put stuff in the chat as we're talking and we can get to it here in just a second. If anybody from my team has anything to say on location template, feel free to chime in. If not, we just have one more thing to review before we open it up for Q&A. Okay. The last thing for Q&A or for updates before we get to that Q&A portion, there have been several questions that have come in regarding budgets and milestone schedules. Milestone schedules, for anyone who is not aware, that is the reimbursement basis of awarded BEAD applicants, and that will be something that awarded applicants will be using in their subaward agreement. It just lays out a cadence of when and how each individual will be reimbursed. So we have created a tool that we think will be very beneficial for applicants to use in contemplating those milestones and contemplating your budget and tying certain project implementation activities to appropriate BEAD budget categories. I'm not going to walk through that in detail at the moment. I just wanted to at least mention it. And upon the conclusion of this office hours, whether it's today, tomorrow, sometime this week, the Beam office will send eligible applicants a kind of recap email, and there will be a training. It's 6 minutes that I recorded to be able to walk y'all through that tool. The only thing I want to mention now about that is that it is not required to be submitted with your application. It is just a supplemental tool to assist any applicants in contemplation of their budgets. So if you're using it and you find it useful, please let us know if you have any questions. You do not have to, but it is highly recommended because in this manner, it appropriately maps milestones to appropriate BEAD budget categories. So you know there wouldn't have to be as much budget data curing on the back end if you were to be awarded. So that will be coming as well. But that is all I've got. I think that was about the time I wanted to keep it at. So unless my team has anything else to say, we can turn it back over to Angel.
I did want to briefly mention that last week, I believe, we received just a tiny bit of guidance from NTA, not the big guidance that we're expecting, but regarding, as you all start to build out your budgets, regarding the allowability of the letter of credit or performance bond, the incremental costs associated with obtaining those. Those have been deemed by NTA as allowable cost, and so you can provide for them within your budgets. Performance bonds, obviously you get a performance bond for a specific project. The letter of credit, there's a slight nuance there. As we understand it, the cost that would be allowable would be the incremental cost associated with your BEAD award. And so to the extent that your normal business practice is to carry an existing letter of credit, to the extent that you increase that letter of credit, the incremental increase in cost would be what would be allowable and applicable to your BEAD specific project. So hopefully that helps as you all start to think through your budgets and complying with that letter of credit or performance bond requirement as you choose.
All right, guys. Well, we did record this first part of the meeting. We are going to provide that for any providers that